Previously on Their Voice Matters, 21-year-old Lauren Agee spent the weekend at WakeFest 2015 with friends. 2 days later, she was found in Center Hill Lake. If you missed part 1, I definitely recommend starting there for the full timeline leading up to where we are now. I'll have it linked here and in the description. In this episode, we'll look at what happened after Lauren was recovered, the official investigation, or lack thereof, the private investigation that challenged law enforcement's version of events, and the questions that still remain. I want to give a quick disclaimer that later in the episode, we will be having a very brief discussion of SA and allegations of domestic harm, so please skip ahead in those sections if needed. I'm Amanda, and this is Their Voice Matters. Let's pick up where we left off. The medical examiner found several injuries on Lauren's body. She had blunt force trauma to the back of her head, skull fractures, and major brain bleeding. There were abrasions on her upper back and the tops of her feet, bruising on her thighs, and broken fingers. Her spine was compressed, and several vertebrae were fractured. There was also an imprint on her chest and what appeared to be a bite mark. Her blood alcohol level was twice the legal driving limit, but no SA kit was performed. Her body was never swabbed for DNA, and her fingernails were never scraped for potential evidence. The medical examiner ruled the manner of death as an accident. The autopsy listed Lauren's cause of death as blunt force trauma with possible drowning. But notably, no water was found in her lungs. That raises an important question. How can someone possibly drown with no water in their lungs? Some have used the term dry drowning, a phrase that's been repeated in the media and even by some investigators. But according to medical experts, dry drowning isn't actually a recognized diagnosis. In true forensic pathology, drowning is defined as respiratory impairment from submersion or immersion in liquid. If there's no water in the lungs and no physiological signs like frothy fluid or waterlogged tissue, then the person didn't drown, even if they were found in water. So while Lauren's death certificate lists possible drowning, the lack of water in the lungs made that conclusion uncertain. It left investigators divided on whether Lauren truly drowned or died from her injuries before or just after entering the water. The DeKalb County Sheriff's Office led the investigation into Lauren's death, with Deputy Jeremy Taylor as the primary investigator. He said he coordinated with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, or TWRA, which had recovered Lauren's body, and notified both the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice. Taylor said he determined the manner of death was an accident once he had, in his words, quote, "no other leads or any form of foul play that I perceived to be foul play." He later said both agencies reviewed the file and agreed with his conclusion. Taylor also claimed that he tried to arrange polygraph examinations for Hannah, Aaron, and Chris, but that the TBI and ATF, who would have conducted those polygraphs, declined, citing insufficient evidence to justify them. Within weeks, the official narrative was set. Lauren Agee had fallen off of the cliff and into the lake during the night and drowned. 2 months later, Taylor finalized his report. 3 short paragraphs, with no supplementary documentation or follow-up reports. It was dated September 23, 2015, and it officially closed the case as an accident. Sherry Smith, Lauren's mother, said, quote, "You believe law enforcement. You do. But my gut feeling was telling me different. But what investigators didn't do would become the real story." From the start, the case was riddled with errors, both procedural and investigative. The canoe the group used to travel between the cliff and the marina was reportedly never taken into evidence. It's also been reported that all 911 calls related to Lauren's death were erased or lost by the DeKalb County 911 Center, and that Deputy Taylor never listened to them. When asked why he didn't, he said, quote, "I just didn't." Even members of law enforcement who were there were frustrated. Ryan Melanson said, quote, "I don't want this case to go away. The way the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office handled it was mind-blowing. Even I know they missed a bunch of evidence. It's like they didn't care and just wanted to close it as an accidental drowning." Typically, when someone dies under unusual circumstances, law enforcement will coordinate with local news outlets to request information or witnesses. But that didn't happen here. Deputy Taylor actually discouraged media coverage, telling one of Lauren's friends during a recorded conversation, quote, "The media is going to take it and turn it into a murder first thing. They're going to try to find something, and it's not right to make a story out of it." Taylor later admitted that he had never led a homicide investigation, and he had no formal training in evaluating bodies or determining cause of death. He also did not collect DNA or fingernail scrapings, did not preserve clothing as evidence, and never photographed or analyzed the cliff area where Lauren may have fallen. He never conducted any reenactment or test to determine whether a fall from that height could have led to where her body was found. When asked why he hadn't done any of those things, his answers were almost always the same. I didn't. I don't know. And most commonly, I just didn't. Taylor acknowledged that Lauren had a knot on the back of her head, bruising on her neck and shoulder, and what could have been swelling. Yet he never discussed these findings with the medical examiner before or after Lauren's autopsy. He said he, quote, believed certain items, like her shoes and purse, were taken into evidence, but later admitted that they were returned to her mother instead. When asked what happened to those missing items, he said, quote, if it's not there, that means I didn't take it. According to witnesses, Lauren was wearing a black tank top and either pink or white shorts that night. Her ex-boyfriend Clint later said that she had been wearing white shorts, but when her body was found, she was wearing hot pink shorts. According to her family, the white pair of shorts has never been located. Lauren's personal effects were given back to her mother, Sherry, but several key items were reportedly missing, including her sleeping bag and clothing. To this day, it's unclear what happened to them. The 45-degree imprint on her chest has also never been explained. The sheriff's department said that it was caused when her body was pulled from the water and she was placed face down on a cooler. The sheriff's department has said, quote, the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency assisted the sheriff's department detectives in loading the body onto a TWRA boat to transport the body back to the boat ramp. Our investigation determined this mark is an identical match to the TWRA boat storage locker lid, where the body was placed face down during transport to the boat ramp. But the problem is, cooler corners would have 90-degree angles. The imprint on Lauren's chest is closer to a 45-degree angle. But do you know what does have a 45-degree angle? That could leave an imprint very similar to the one found on Lauren? The front end or bow of a canoe. The photos of the imprint and the canoe show a very similar shape. When Lauren's body was pulled from the water, she was placed onto a bigger boat, not on a canoe. So how could the imprint have gotten there? According to Chris Yarchuk, if she was already dead and placed face down on the bow of a canoe to be moved, her head and arms in the canoe and her legs and feet in the water, it's possible that that's where the imprint came from. Although that has never been conclusively shown to be what caused the imprint. In the autopsy photos, Lauren does have scratches on the tops of her feet. How they got there was never officially explained. Next, I'm going to very briefly talk about SA, so please skip ahead if needed. Deputy Taylor said that he didn't know investigators must specifically request an SA kit, so none was ever done on Lauren. He also said he believed it wouldn't have been necessary anyway, because Lauren reportedly had a tampon in, meaning to him, there was no way she could have been assaulted. Sheila Wysocki, the private investigator hired by the family to look into Lauren's case, who we'll talk much more about later, said she believes the medical examiner not performing an SA kit was highly unusual. Sheila said, quote, which infuriates me, and you can be SA'd with a tampon in. Another injury found on Lauren's body that's never officially been explained by DeKalb County investigators was the bruising on the top of Lauren's thighs. It's important to note that bruises only form while blood is circulating, so any bruising was antemortem, or before her death. However, Sheila said it was her opinion that, quote, the significance to me of the bruising on the thighs initially was someone putting their knees on a person holding them down. And without having an SA kit done, we may never know if the injuries were caused by some SA-motivated attack or caused by something else entirely. Scene handling raised even more alarms. Witness officers said Lauren's body wasn't immediately placed onto a tarp or into a body bag on the TWRA boat, risking contamination. Proper protocol would have been to place Lauren on a clean tarp or open body bag on the boat to preserve trace evidence. TWRA reportedly used a hook pole to recover the body, but potential tool mark artifacts reportedly weren't documented. Taylor also acknowledged that there were jagged rocks below the cliff, but said he didn't investigate them because he couldn't reach them. When asked if he could have taken a boat, he replied that he, quote, still couldn't have climbed up. He never searched for blood on the rocks, never ordered a dive team to look for evidence in the lake, and never determined if it was possible that Lauren could have fallen from the spot where the group was camping. When asked if he'd tried to reenact the fall, he said, quote, no, I didn't. When asked why, he replied, quote, because I didn't know where to do that. He also didn't verify current patterns or dam flow data to confirm whether her body's location aligned with an accidental fall. When asked whether that would have mattered, he said, quote, "Honestly, I don't know because I don't know the current." And when Officer Yarchuk later compared what he saw at the campsite to the evidence photos, he believed items had been moved before documentation. According to him, items in the evidence photos looked different from when he saw them up at the campsite. Deputy Taylor admitted he did not know when Lauren was last seen alive, and also failed to document all interviews. Taylor claimed to have interviewed Hannah, Aaron, and Chris individually, but couldn't remember how many times or whether or not those interviews were recorded. Some witnesses were never recorded, and others weren't written down. And a few, including key witnesses who saw Lauren on Saturday night, he couldn't remember speaking with. He admitted it was possible he spoke with them again later and simply didn't document it. In addition, witnesses who were among the last to see Lauren alive, like Evan Shelton, said they were never contacted by DeKalb County investigators. The same was true for the off-duty officers who were at the scene and the Blair family who had found Lauren's body. The houseboat owners who saw Lauren's group the night before and were also among the last people to see Lauren said police never interviewed them either. They said they only realized what happened 2 days later after they saw news reports, that a body had been found in the lake and the missing girl was Lauren. He also reportedly failed to speak with TWRA agents involved in recovering Lauren's body. Every major step of the investigation, forensic collection, witness interviews, environmental testing, was largely skipped, undocumented, or forgotten. Taylor appeared to rely almost entirely on intuition rather than protocol. His reasoning repeated over and over throughout his later depositions and interviews. Quote, "No signs of struggle, so no evidence needed. I didn't. I don't know. I just didn't." Officer Ryan Melanson's hindsight mirrored the family's frustration. He said, quote, "I had faith that they were doing their job. Unfortunately, I'm not sure what all happened with their investigation, but here we are today." Whether through inexperience, indifference, or both, the investigation into Lauren Agee's death fell apart before it even began. When it came time for Lauren's funeral, the family debated whether Hannah, Aaron, and Chris should be allowed to attend. While some things weren't adding up, at the time, there wasn't any evidence to suggest that they'd been involved in Lauren's death. They ultimately decided that they could, and all three were invited, but none of them showed up, something that deeply bothered Lauren's family. That none of the three people who'd last been with her attended her funeral. In fact, Chris had told Deputy Taylor the day before the funeral that he planned to attend, but none of them came. Later, Chris claimed that Aaron told him Sherry wouldn't allow them to go, though when asked whether he had verified that, he admitted that he hadn't. Sherry said that when she started asking questions about Lauren's death, people told her things like, quote, "You need to get over it. You need to move on with your life." And that's when she realized, quote, "Something was not normal. Something was not right." As the weeks passed, more and more people around Lauren's family began to question the same things. If Lauren's death had truly been an accident, why were there so many inconsistencies and so many people avoiding questions? That's when Sherry decided to launch her own search for the truth. For Sherry, nothing about this felt right. Her daughter had been missing for a full day and no one had called. The explanations weren't making sense, and her gut told her there was more to this story. Sherry decided to stop relying on other people's answers and to start finding her own. Sherry hired private investigator Sheila Wysocki. Sheila's impression of the official case was blunt. In her view, the sheriff's office settled on accident within minutes and effectively stopped investigating within 48 hours, before the autopsy report was even back. Sheila decided to reconstruct the fall that Lauren had supposedly suffered, according to investigators. A dummy approximating Lauren's size and weight was dropped, pushed, and thrown from multiple points near the campsite, about 50 times. Every time, it tumbled into the brush and trees and never made it cleanly to the water. Sheila said, quote, "It couldn't. It didn't. It never did. When you fall, you have arms and legs. You don't roll like a ball. There's no way that she would have hit the water. There's no way she did hit the water. Police have said she fell off the cliff. But exactly where? Where's the blood? Show me the pictures of the blood on the rocks. Show me the broken twigs." They also decided to test the currents to see if it was possible for Lauren's body to end up where it did, if she fell off the cliff near the campsite. Using a simple milk jug drift test, they tracked the surface current. The flow that day would have carried a body toward the marina, not into the cove where Lauren's body was recovered. So even if Lauren somehow reached the water, the current suggests she shouldn't have ended up where she was found. There were also concerns with the autopsy results. Sheila believed there were injuries missed in the original autopsy. injuries that were later seen in photos. Another autopsy was conducted. According to Sherry, quote, "Her larynx was crushed. The new autopsy that we did shows that her larynx was crushed and that only happens from choking. You can't get choked from a fall." Sheila also noted reported hemorrhaging in the throat visible in images, and stated the initial autopsy didn't mention a split lip or broken nose, injuries that were found in the second autopsy. An independent investigator reviewed the records and photos and drew several key conclusions. Lauren was believed to be last seen around 3:30 a.m. when the group went to bed at the campsite and was recovered around 4:30 p.m., about 13 hours later. Her skin color appeared redder than the deep purple lividity typically seen around the 8-hour mark, suggesting a more recent death than the official narrative implies. Also, bodies in water usually sink first and float later as gases form. But Lauren was already floating, apparently buoyed by an air pocket under her tank top. The forensic expert brought in by Sheila noted the presence of frothy foam, a sign often associated with being alive upon water entry. He believed Lauren may have entered the water alive after sustaining blunt force trauma and died there. In his view, that finding could help explain why the medical examiner listed possible drowning, even though the circumstances still pointed to significant trauma being the actual cause of death. A 90-foot fall should produce catastrophic trauma, but Lauren's injuries didn't fit that. If rocks were involved, he'd also expect blood, hair, or some sign of injury at the impact site, but none was documented. The spinal compression made more sense with a feet-first or upright impact than a head-first plunge, especially since the trauma was to the back of her head, not the top. As far as the bathroom theory goes, the autopsy noted that Lauren had around 1.5 tablespoons of urine in her bladder, far too little to suggest she'd woken up needing to use the bathroom. For context, the average woman's bladder can hold about 500 milliliters, or about 33 tablespoons, and most people feel the urge to go when it's about half full. That undercuts the theory that she fell trying to relieve herself during the night. The investigator also noted that Lauren's body position was consistent with early stages of rigor mortis, or the stiffening of muscles after death, developing in the water, but said that full or fixed rigor hadn't set in yet. Rigor mortis typically begins to set in around 1 to 3 hours after death and becomes fixed after about 8 to 10 hours, but then fades after 24 to 36 hours. Based on that timeline, her likely time of death would have been much later in the morning than investigators originally believed. Since Lauren's body was found around 4:30 p.m., fixed rigor not yet being present would suggest she died no earlier than approximately 6:30 to 8:30 a.m. Between the failed reenactments, current direction, injury mechanics, and the second opinion forensics, the accident narrative looked less and less like an answer, and more like an apparent shortcut. The next question became unavoidable. What were Hannah, Aaron, and Chris really doing and saying across those 2 nights? Over time, all 3 gave statements that changed in key ways, and each had background details that, while not proof of wrongdoing, definitely raised questions about their credibility. Hannah and Lauren had known each other for years, though by most accounts they weren't especially close. Lauren's mom, Sherry, said Hannah usually only made time for Lauren, quote, when she was between boyfriends. Just days after Lauren's death, Hannah reportedly showed up unannounced at Sherry's house while friends and family were gathered. According to Sherry's private investigator, Sheila, Hannah hadn't been invited. The only way she would have known about the gathering was through Samantha Arnold, who was in attendance. Lexi, one of Lauren's close friends who was at the house, described Hannah's behavior that day as, quote, dramatic and attention-seeking. She said Hannah came in and cried loudly, saying, quote, I wish it was me, before going into the bathroom where Samantha followed. She said she heard them whispering and laughing in the bathroom. Lexi confronted her, saying, quote, I know you're lying. I know Sam is lying. I know you're all lying. Hannah denied it, insisting she'd told everything she knew. Lexi later told police that Hannah had said, quote, we all slept together in the tent, then woke up and Lauren was gone. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. But others described the sleeping setup differently, saying some in the group used hammocks, not tents, making Hannah's version to Lexi hard to reconcile. Lexi recalled watching a news story about Lauren's death later that day, muttering, quote, these assholes did it, while sitting next to Hannah, not realizing at first that she was right beside her. It just shows how openly suspicious people already were of her behavior. Lauren's father, Brian, noticed other oddities after his daughter's death as well. He said Hannah broke her lease almost immediately and moved back in with her parents, which he found strange. While much of the attention has centered on Hannah's behavior, her boyfriend Aaron also drew scrutiny for both his past and his actions after the weekend. Aaron Lilly was Hannah's boyfriend. He met Lauren for the first time that weekend at WakeFest. Aaron had a history that gave Lauren's family pause. I'm going to briefly discuss allegations of domestic harm, so please skip ahead if needed. Aaron's ex-girlfriend, Cassie Franks, said, quote, "We got into a domestic dispute. He hit me multiple times. Both were charged with domestic assault, although the charges were eventually dropped." According to Cassie, she told Deputy Jeremy Taylor about that history when she was interviewed, but said that what she told him never appeared in the police report. Cassie recalled telling him everything she knew, and that Aaron had, quote, "a violent past." She said Taylor responded, quote, "Well, that has nothing to do with this. There's no violence in this matter. It was an accident, and we're just trying to prove that it was an accident." Cassie later said that Aaron didn't just harm her physically. Cassie also described Aaron as highly manipulative, someone who could shift from charm to anger in a heartbeat and make people question their own judgment. She said he had a way of controlling the tone of every situation, which made it difficult for those around him to stand up to him. When asked about Cassie's statement that Aaron had physically harmed her, Deputy Taylor said it didn't raise his suspicion. He said, quote, "Not from what I found." Roughly a month after Lauren's death, Hannah and Aaron moved to Florida. It's unclear whether that move had been planned beforehand or was a decision made after the investigation started. While there's no proof Aaron harmed Hannah, some close to the case have wondered whether the same controlling behavior Cassie described may have carried into his next relationship, possibly helping explain her silence or conflicting statements. Christopher Stout was also new to both Lauren and Hannah, but he was a friend of Aaron's. After Lauren's death, Chris's story and behavior raised questions for many who followed the case. In the years afterward, he was arrested several times for DUI and served a lengthy jail sentence, something that, while not directly related, added to the family's doubts about his character. According to reports, after leaving WakeFest, Chris also called the same phone number 6 times in a row, then later claimed he didn't know who the number belonged to. Those who spoke with him at the time described him as nervous and inconsistent. He gave differing accounts of the final hours at the campsite, and like Hannah and Aaron, changed key details when retelling what happened that night. Another figure connected to the group was Brix Gambrell, a friend of Aaron and Chris. Brix had gone to high school with both Hannah and Lauren, though Lauren's mother, Sherry, said the two never hung out and that she'd never met him before. Brix reportedly helped Aaron set up the campsite and was seen socializing with the group that weekend. Chris later said he didn't think Brix spent the night on the cliff. He believed Brix slept in someone else's car. Despite being one of the few people who could have provided important context about what happened that weekend, police never interviewed Brix. According to witnesses, he stayed inside Fishlip's bar, while the others were being questioned by law enforcement. The day after Lauren's death, Brix showed up unannounced at the Agee's family home. He said he was a friend of her brother Josh, though Sherry said she never saw him before. Sherry described him as shy, avoiding eye contact, gritting his teeth, and leaving abruptly. She remembered him asking, "Do you know what happened?" And when she said no and asked him if he knew, he responded that he, quote, "just wanted to come by," and left. Behavior she later described as, quote, "the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life." While nothing about that visit directly tied Brix to Lauren's death, it added to the family's unease. One more strange interaction in a case already full of contradictions. Clint Martin, Lauren's ex-boyfriend, was also at WakeFest that weekend with his girlfriend, Callie. Hannah, Aaron, and Chris each claimed that Lauren tried to talk to Clint, or even, quote, made moves on him that night, an allegation that quickly spread in early reports. But according to Clint, none of that ever happened. He said that around 9 p.m. on Saturday, Lauren tried to approach him, but he simply walked away, and they didn't speak again. Clint and Evan Shelton are cousins. Evan later confirmed that he never saw any contact between the two that weekend. Clint said they were never closer than 6 feet apart, and denied any argument or physical interaction. For investigators, Clint's alibi checked out. He, Callie, and Evan spent the evening with friends, and then returned to sleep in Teresa, Evan's mother's SUV, for the rest of the night. Teresa verified that they stayed there until the morning. Evan Shelton was reportedly one of the last people to see Lauren alive on Saturday night and into the early morning hours of Sunday. He described her as being in good spirits, sociable, balanced, and not intoxicated, emphasizing that she could handle her liquor and was far from out of control. Across the statements from Hannah, Aaron, and Chris, the explanations kept changing. Sometimes more than one version appeared in the same interview. By the time investigators compared everyone's statements, the truth of that night seemed to shift every time it was retold. Sherry remembers the very first question that hit her at the hospital. She said, quote, "The first thing that popped into my mind was, where are the kids she was with? She was missing for an entire day and nobody notified us. So we knew then, in the hospital, there's something that's not right." Off-duty officer Chris Yarchuk, who was on the water that day, was just as blunt. He said, quote, "These 3 kids are covering it up, and I'll believe that till I go to my grave. I know she didn't drown. People that drown sink." And then came their behavior. The very next day, after Lauren died, Chris Stout posted on Instagram, quote, "Best weekend ever." Sherry's reaction was simple. Who does that? In a single short interview, Hannah gave multiple conflicting stories. She said they all canoed back to the cliff, went to bed, and that Lauren probably got up to pee in the night and fell. But later, she said that Lauren, quote, "might have gotten on a houseboat." But then, when pressed, she backtracked again, saying, quote, "Yes, she was up there with us." On Sunday morning, Hannah told some people that Lauren hadn't come back from the bar on Saturday night. She also stated that the whole reason Lauren went to WakeFest was to see Clint, even though she had a boyfriend that she loved back home. She said it's possible that Lauren left the campsite to go see Clint, which Clint denies. But she also confirmed that the canoe was still there when they woke up on Sunday morning, which undercuts any version where Lauren left on her own by water. Hannah did reportedly mention the possibility that Lauren had been picked up by someone that night, by Clint or even by Evan. But again, both have alibis for that night that we've previously discussed. Sheila went to Hannah and Aaron's home in Florida, unannounced, to see if Hannah would talk to her. And she did. And this interview was recorded. Interestingly, Aaron called Hannah within minutes. When she said she was talking to someone about Lauren, Sheila said she could hear Aaron through the phone say, quote, "Stick to the story." While the interview continued, a young man kept interrupting, walking in and out of the room and moving Sheila's recorder. Hannah didn't seem bothered by it, but Sheila noted how odd it was. That young man was Brix Gambrell, who reportedly helped set up the campsite and was with the group for much of the weekend. Later, after another phone call from someone else urging her to talk to a lawyer, Hannah began crying, saying she wanted to help but didn't want to be naive. Immediately after Lauren's death, Chris was reportedly asked if he and Lauren had any intimate contact, and he told investigators there wasn't any. Later, he said they had been intimate, explaining he only admitted it because he thought it would, quote, "come out anyway." Deputy Taylor dismissed the statement, saying he didn't believe it because Lauren was, quote, "on her period." Of course, that doesn't rule out intimate contact, consensual or otherwise. In deposition, Chris contradicted himself again, first saying he hadn't spoken to Lauren that night after they got back to the campsite, but then said that she had been talking about her ex. He reportedly told Deputy Taylor that he had seen Clint on Sunday morning, and Clint supposedly said that Lauren came back to the bar and tried to make out with him. So they assumed she was fine and went about her day until about 4:30 p.m., when boats began gathering near the cove. Again, the canoe was still at the campsite, so it's unlikely that Lauren left to go see Clint. Then Chris added, quote, "Honestly, I don't know. My honest opinion is she went to the bathroom and slipped." And then almost as an afterthought, he said, quote, "Now that I think about it, it probably wasn't the safest spot to camp." In late 2016, Lauren's mother, Sherry Smith, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against 4 people. The 3 who were with Lauren the night she died, Hannah Palmer, Aaron Lilly, and Christopher Stout, as well as Brix Gambrell. The family's goal wasn't financial. They wanted accountability and answers. But the case quickly became complicated. The trial judge ruled that Hannah Palmer would be dismissed from the suit, saying there wasn't enough evidence that she was involved in Lauren's death. Lauren's family disagreed, believing the ruling was unfair and showed bias. They argued there was plenty of circumstantial evidence, along with witness accounts and conflicting statements, to warrant answers from all defendants. So they appealed the decision. While the legal process unfolded, the court also issued a gag order, forbidding anyone involved in the case from speaking publicly. The family's private investigator, Sheila, started a podcast called Without Warning, which had become one of the few ways to keep Lauren's story alive, as well as to help crowdfund the investigation. The gag order meant Lauren's family and Sheila would have to stop discussing the case on the podcast. Faced with that choice, Lauren's family made the painful decision to drop the lawsuit so the podcast and the public conversation could continue. But the story didn't end there. In 2019, the Tennessee Court of Appeals reviewed the case and issued a ruling that partially vindicated the family. The court ruled that the earlier judge had erred by dismissing Hannah too early and by excluding key pieces of evidence. The case was sent back for further proceedings, confirming that the family's concerns were at least legally valid. Since the lawsuit was dropped, it hasn't resulted in a final verdict, and no criminal charges have ever been filed. But for Lauren's family, the case stands as one more example of what they've faced from the start. A fight not only for justice, but for the truth to be heard. Today, Lauren's case remains officially closed. The only person with the power to reopen it is the district attorney, and despite multiple requests, that hasn't happened. There have been efforts over the years to change that, including a Change.org petition that gathered more than 20,000 signatures. But so far, those efforts haven't been successful. Lauren's mother, Sherry, has made it her mission to keep fighting for answers. She said, quote, "I'm not going to stop until we have the truth of what happened to Lauren. I am her voice. I am her voice as her mother. I have to be her voice, and I have to pursue the truth because I owe that to her. I'm all she had, and she would expect nothing less from me." Private investigator Sheila Wysocki has stood by the family since the beginning, stating, quote, "This family has done nothing wrong. They just want answers, and they want to be heard. There's nothing wrong with that. Instead, they've had to pay and pay and pay just to get an investigation done." And Sherry's words in one interview still echo today, quote, "I am her mother. I will always be her mother. I will do anything and everything for my baby to prove to the world that she did not die by falling off that cliff. I want the truth. I owe my daughter the truth, and I will go to my grave trying to find it." Even after years of frustration, she still holds on to hope, saying, quote, "I don't know if I'm ever going to find out what really truthfully happened to Lauren, but I have faith that there are good people, that somebody at some point knows something and will do the right thing. If you're that person, if you know something and you're ready to do the right thing, please reach out. You can call 1-888-599-0008 or email tips@SheilaWysocki.com. To learn more about the investigation into Lauren's death, you can also listen to Sheila Wysocki's podcast, Without Warning, which takes a much deeper look into Lauren's case than I was able to here. The first season is all about Lauren's case. Lauren's story is heartbreaking, but it's not isolated. It's one of many where families have been left to seek answers on their own, long after officials closed the case. If you'd like to help more people learn about Lauren's case and others like it, please like, share, subscribe, or follow the podcast for future episodes. Every bit of engagement helps keep stories like these in the spotlight. If this case moved you, I recommend checking out my episode on Noah Pressgrove next. His family is still searching for the truth after his mysterious death. And like Lauren's loved ones, they're fighting for answers that should have come long ago. Until next time, remember, their voice matters, and it's up to all of us to keep it alive. Thanks for being here. Thanks for caring, and I'll see you in the next episode.